we're not some separate minds drifting around controlling a body, right? We are body emerging as mind at the same time. And it's that change that then puts us in a different relationship where we then have a different sense of responsibility to what does it mean to take care of ourselves. It's not just checking off a box, right? It's actually showing up physically, mentally, emotionally aligned as the type of person you want to be on this planet.
So Jeff, we talked about two things, right? We talked about our mental challenges, call them mental health. We talked a little bit about nutrition and the various things which you need to understand to your concept of going upstream. So let's focus a little bit on how do you get this done, right? So do you have a framework in mind which is strategic, long term? By the way, what is the definition of long term? And then will you have something which is more tactical, which can give me rewards tomorrow?
Yeah. I mean, this is a lifelong journey that is always evolving. And I say this, right? Like your body is always changing. So we always need, again, to be in conversation and collaboration to figure out what do I need now. Uh, that being said, right, it's like we're all going to wake up tomorrow morning and we're going to want to eat something, right? Are we going to exercise that day? How are we going to spend this day? What are the thoughts that are going to go through our head, right? All this is going to impact our health. So as I said, diet and exercise are extremely important. However, I find that we tend to over-focus the conversation on those. So there's actually three other pieces that I like to address first, right? So if you came to me and said, hey, like I recognize I'm not on a good path. My life feels out of balance. I don't feel healthy and fit, all right? And so the three things that I'm going to work with you first is going to be sleep, screens, and social support. So you got three S's. Because I find that when you get the sleep, the screen time, and the social supports right, then that actually takes away a huge piece of the stressors that then drive so many men to this place of imbalance, or drive so many men to then want to numb themselves out with often more screen time and more disconnection, right? Right. So, but when you can get these pieces together, it's key. Now, again, the screen thing, right? Some of it is for work that you can't avoid, but there's a lot of screen stuff. And I'm not just saying that you shouldn't be on screens, but being mindful about A, how much screen time you have, B, what are you consuming through that screen time, right? What are you feeding your mind is important as what you're feeding your body in terms of the media, the social media, the things you're reading, right? And then the people in your life, right? A lot of men, right, kind of drift towards isolation. That's another huge problem is loneliness, right? A lot of guys are feeling cut off. We don't have really deep friendships. We might know a lot of people. We might have some work acquaintances. You might even go out and, again, like have a drink and some food. Maybe it's not the healthiest thing for your body, but there's a sense of connection there. But yet you might not really feel like, is that the person, right? When you wake up in the middle of the night, because your chest is pounding and hurting and you're sweating, are you going to call that person, right? Like who's in your life to support you when things are really hard? And this goes back to this idea of like, well, guess what? We're all going to die at some point. We just don't know when. Right? And when we start to really recognize that, hey, our time on this planet is very finite. We're talking weeks. We're talking hours, right? We only have so many hours here. So what do you want to do with that time? And when you're on your deathbed looking back, how do you want to look back on your life? What regrets are you going to have? That's important to take that. That's the long view. So that goes back to, all right, how today? How am I managing my screen time? What kind of social connection do I have, or connection with nature that helps me feel grounded? And then am I getting enough restful sleep? I think the sleep piece is key. So many guys just, end up staying up too late, working till crazy hours, and then just fuels this cycle, right? And again, I don't want to undermine a lot of people that have very, very intense jobs and hard workloads. If you're a CEO, right, it all stops with you. There's a lot of people looking at you. There's a lot of pressure on you. And so obviously there are certain times where, you might have a sleepless night, but when you let that turn into your lifestyle, where that becomes the norm, right? Where you don't even try to get a good night's sleep, right? Like now you're setting yourself up for failure because every morning you're waking up and your battery is already drained, and you're never going to be able to make good decisions for your business, for your food, right? You're never going to be able to really take good care of yourself. So I really try to focus on the sleep piece. Then once you have that in place, then we can talk about, okay, what are you eating? How are you exercising? All right. Do you have the right preventative care? We talked a little bit about, like, doctor's appointments, screenings, right? Are you managing your health in that capacity, right? These sort of things then start to layer on top of each other. All right. And it's not rocket science. It's pretty simple stuff, but you got to do it step by step.
No, this is very interesting, right? As you were speaking, right, it was reflecting on my state of affairs as a man, and also as somebody who's going towards this oblivion we normally refer to as death, and we tend not to talk about it, but I think it brings to that focus, right? I think the three S's you talked about, I think the most important aspect about those three S's as you were speaking about it was, I think, hey, the absence of these three S's, we are basically filling up our time, right? So every day we wake up, we accidentally go on a social media platform, spend 30, 40 minutes there. It's not specific. We're not looking for anything. We just we just scroll our life away. And imagine if I actually became a little bit more deliberate and took that fill in the blank time out of my life and then emptied it up. I'm sure that that a lot of beautiful time which is more deliberate will manifest, and that I can use for stuff such as sleep. I cannot agree with you any more than what you said about sleep, right? If I don't go to bed on a certain point of time, my circadian clock is broken, and it just messes up the next day, and so many things are dependent on the next day, that just a simple act of making sure I go to bed at a particular time is so important. So I think you kind of nailed, you kind of were talking about me. I felt like in a lot of that conversation, and that reactive man I am, versus becoming a little bit more proactive.
Yeah.
Um,
That shift
so,
from being reactive to proactive, you just nailed it, people. That's it. That's exactly what I work with men on, trying to shift that from
right.
reactive to proactive.
So say more on the fact that you touched briefly on those exam part, right? Those this what do you mean by that?
On the exam part, what exactly are you
What
referring to?
the different types of investigations you as a man, whether it's around, I presume blood tests and all that, right? So, but I wanted you to say a little bit more on those things.
Yeah. Well, I think prioritizing preventative healthcare, regular check-ins is important. Getting your blood work done at least once a year, right? Now there's so many companies where you can get this done without having to go to a doctor, right? I think tracking things like your blood sugar levels, so like A1C, right? If you can do fasting glucose or even insulin levels, great, right? Checking your cholesterol, checking your blood pressure. There's a lot of other important tests, looking at markers of inflammation, CRP, looking at, things for like ApoE, right? Even doing some genetic testing if you have family history of cancer or other things. It's like, I know I have some things that run in my family and I got tested. Now I can, again, take a proactive approach. I can do those screenings a little more regularly. I know I have an increased risk. So I can pay attention for if some of those symptoms start to arise, right? So you can stay ahead of these potential issues. So I really think that piece is important. I'm a big fan of continuous glucose monitors in terms of getting that closed feedback loop. And so you can really begin to see, hey, when I eat this, my blood sugar skyrockets and then I feel like crap. You're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, right? So always checking, under the hood is important, as well as, physically otherwise, right? Like basic things. Can you walk up 5 flights of stairs without getting winded and losing your breath? If you need to run and chase after a train, do you feel like you have the strength to do that, right? When you're going to the, I just came from the airport yesterday, right? And I've got, two very heavy suitcases I'm lugging around. Like, do I feel strong and fit and adequate to do that? Right. And there's a correlation between being, physically fit and then being fit enough to lead. And I think every man deserves both of these things in their life. Uh,
Yeah. I think, but I think as I was smiling about that, right? I think we all men definitely, our desire is to live to the fullest, and our Creator has created us in a certain way that we always want to lift those two suitcases, right, 50 pound each, and feel okay about it. And then if we're not doing that, we feel like, oh, there's something wrong, right? So I mean, I think this is so important what you said, right? But may I add to your three S's? I think you also added one D, which is the data insight, right?
Mhm.
Basically, you're like, hey, if you are a lot more informed through your blood test, I mean, I know you're advocating once a year. I actually advocate maybe 2 or 3 times a year. The reason is,
Agreed. Yeah.
uh, the reason I see personally is because, like for example, a lot of times, you're eating everything right and you're sleeping right, but you still feel like, oh, I'm low energy or whatever, and that might have to do with a potassium deficiency or a vitamin D3, and then the causality of D3 going into various places, or magnesium. You kind of tend to know all these imbalances when you do more periodic tests, right?
Yeah. I mean, looking for nutrient deficiencies is very important. You know, as we had talked about, we can't just see food through the lens of calories and macronutrients, right? Food is energy and information together, and they both are vitally important. When we just look at food as energy, is like it has this number of calories of protein, right? We're not thinking about the information that that food is giving our cells, right? Or it's literally instructing our cells to do certain things that are tend to be either inflammatory and unhelpful, or healing. And that information is packed into the micronutrients, right? The minerals, and it's also just in terms of what is on the food in terms of pesticides and herbicides and residues, and how the food is grown, and so those pieces are equally as important.
No, this is fantastic. I think you've put it very, very beautifully on this one, right? Um, so I think the last question I want to ask you is this, Jeff, right? So let's put it all together, right? So for our audience, right? Is there something we can help our fellow folks, I would say men out there? Is there anything we can do for them so that they can get better with their health?
Yeah. There's a moment in every man's life where I think the way he's been living just stops working. And sometimes that trigger is waking up and looking in the mirror and being like, oh my god, like I don't like what I see. Sometimes it's the putting on that suit that fit for so many years and now you're struggling to button it up. Sometimes it's the trying to like lift up your kid and recognizing you can't bend over without your back hurting, right? Like whatever that trigger is for you that makes you realize, hold on, right? Like the way I've been living is not working anymore. It might feel like burnout, it might feel like frustration, or just this nagging sense that like you're not living up to your potential. And if you've been feeling that pull, right, that's a call for you to move beyond, right? But you're not meant to do it alone. We're not meant to go on this journey alone. You don't have to do it on your own. In fact, if you could have done it on your own, you would have done it, right? And so I think this is this idea again, the social support piece, super super important here.
No, that's fantastic, right, Jeff? I think your conversation has been very, very fruitful. Really, really enjoyed the insights, and definitely, I think you've worked with a lot of individuals out there, and you really understand what we go through as Americans. So, thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Yeah, I work with a lot of, high performing men. I know what actually causes, sustainable transformation, not just these surface level fixes. And it means, again, doing this deep inner work to break free from these man box mindsets and these beliefs that no longer serve you. Right. So if you're the type of guy who is, tired of numbing himself out with work or with food or with drinking, and you want to connect with your real strength, or if you feel like you've been carrying around too much and can't figure out how to set boundaries, or you're just burning out, right? And you need a more sustainable way to live and succeed, reach out, and I'm happy to connect with you.
Yep, definitely. I think Jeff is a fantastic resource in the community. I would love for all of you guys to hit him up as well. He also runs some very fantastic programs for fellows like me. So thank you, Jeff.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
people.